The evening sky turned deep purple as the sun disappeared behind the row of oak trees lining Oak Ridge Avenue. Dr. Anthony Jackson checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. He still had about an hour before the international video conference with his team, in Japan, Germany, and South Korea. Their new satellite technology couldn't wait, not with the launch scheduled for next month. Anthony adjusted his glasses and turned down the tree-lined street. As the director of Advanced Propulsion Systems at NASA, his mind constantly buzzed with calculations, meeting schedules, and project deadlines. 20 years of working on spacecraft had trained his brain to run multiple programs at once, like the supercomputers he used daily. His phone chimed from the cup holder, a text from his colleague, Dr. Chen. "Don't forget to bring the Henderson files. We need to review the propulsion data before the call." Anthony nodded to himself. The files sat in his briefcase on the passenger seat, containing information so sensitive that only 12 people in the country had clearance to see it. He slowed down, checking street numbers on the elegant homes. Chen had recently moved to this suburban neighborhood, and Anthony had never visited before. Blue and red lights suddenly flooded his rearview mirror, the harsh flashing making him squint. Anthony checked his speedometer. He'd been going exactly 2 miles under the limit. He pulled over carefully, making sure to stop completely before putting the car in park. Years of being black in America had taught him the unwritten rules of police encounters. He took a deep breath, placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen, and waited. 2 officers approached, one on each side of his car. The taller one, with a crew cut and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, tapped on the driver's window with his flashlight. Anthony pressed the button to lower the window. "Good evening, officer," he said in the calm, measured voice he used during NASA budget hearings. "License and registration," the officer demanded, without returning the greeting. His nameplate read, Officer Wilson. His partner, a shorter man with close-set eyes, stood at the passenger window, shining his flashlight directly into the car, across Anthony's face, then onto his briefcase. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" Anthony asked politely as he reached slowly, deliberately for his wallet. "You were driving suspiciously," Wilson stated flatly, watching Anthony's movements with narrowed eyes. "This is a nice neighborhood. People notice when things don't belong." Anthony felt the familiar weight settle in his stomach. The same weight he'd felt countless times before, from elementary school to MIT to his first day at NASA. The weight of being seen as out of place. "I'm visiting a colleague," he explained, handing over his license and registration. "Dr. Chen. He lives at 487 Oak Ridge. We work together at NASA." Wilson took the documents with a skeptical look. "NASA, huh? And what do you do there? Mop the floors?" The second officer snorted. His nameplate read, Officer Briggs. "I'm the Director of Advanced Propulsion Systems," Anthony replied, keeping his voice steady despite the insult. He reached for his NASA ID in his jacket pocket. "Don't move," Wilson barked, hand moving to his holster. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Anthony froze, heart pounding. "My NASA identification is in my inside pocket. I was just going to show you." "Step out of the vehicle," Wilson ordered, already opening the car door. Slowly. "Officer, I'm running late for an important video conference regarding a satellite launch. If you could just verify my—" Briggs had circled around now. He said, "Get out of the car now." Anthony carefully unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out, standing straight in his tailored suit. At 6'2" with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, he projected the image of the distinguished scientist he was. But in this moment, all the officers saw was his skin color. "Listen," Anthony began. "I have classified materials in my briefcase related to national security. I'm authorized to carry them to Dr. Chen's house for our meeting. If you need to verify my identity, you can call NASA headquarters or even Space Force Command. General Washington can confirm my identity." Wilson scoffed. "Space Force? You expect us to believe that? Hands behind your back." "This is unnecessary," Anthony said firmly. "I've done nothing wrong." "Resisting arrest," Briggs noted, already reaching for his handcuffs. I'm not resisting anything, Anthony stated, but kept his body language non-threatening. I'm simply trying to explain. Wilson grabbed Anthony's arm, twisting it behind his back with unnecessary force. The motion sent a sharp pain through Anthony's shoulder, the same one he'd injured playing basketball with his son last month. "Stop resisting," Wilson shouted, though Anthony wasn't fighting back. "I'm not resisting," Anthony repeated, wincing as the cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists. "You're making a serious mistake." Lights began turning on in nearby houses. Faces appeared in windows. A few neighbors stepped onto their porches to watch as the distinguished NASA director was handcuffed beside his car. "What's going on here?" An elderly white woman called from her lawn. "Is everything all right?" "Police. Business, ma'am," Briggs replied. "Please go back inside." But she didn't move. Neither did the growing audience of neighbors, several holding up phones recording the scene. "My name is Dr. Anthony Jackson," he called out, loud enough for the neighbors and their cameras to hear. "I'm the Director of Advanced Propulsion Systems at NASA. I'm here to visit Dr. Chen at 487 Oak Ridge. These officers are detaining me without cause." "Shut up," Wilson hissed, tightening the cuffs. "You're making this worse for yourself." A young woman stepped forward from the gathering crowd. "I know Dr. Chen. He mentioned a colleague was coming over tonight." Wilson ignored her, pushing Anthony toward the police cruiser. "We're going to run your information, and if you're lying about any of this, you're in serious trouble." As they forced him into the back seat, Anthony caught sight of his briefcase still sitting on the passenger seat of his car. The briefcase containing designs and specifications that could compromise national security if they fell into the wrong hands. "Officer, that briefcase contains classified documents. You can't leave it unsecured," he urged. Briggs smirked. "Now it's a briefcase full of top-secret space stuff? What's next, alien technology?" The cruiser door slammed shut, and Anthony watched through the window as Wilson returned to his car, opened the passenger door, and picked up the briefcase. One thought cut through Anthony's rising anger and fear. Once this was over, these officers would learn exactly who they had handcuffed tonight, and what happens when you mistake a NASA director for a criminal based solely on the color of his skin. The police cruiser felt like an oven despite the cool evening air outside. Dr. Anthony Jackson shifted uncomfortably, the handcuffs digging into his wrists. Through the window, he watched Officer Wilson carelessly flip through the classified documents in his briefcase. Each turn of a page made Anthony's stomach tighten. Those papers contained satellite designs that foreign governments would pay millions to see. "Those documents are classified," Anthony called through the partially open window. "You need special clearance to view them." Wilson barely looked up. "Sure they are, buddy, and I'm an astronaut." 45 minutes passed. The dashboard clock now read 7:32 p.m. Anthony had missed the start of his video conference. 6 brilliant scientists across 3 continents were probably wondering where he was. The satellite launch timeline would fall behind schedule, and delays cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars per day. Officer Briggs leaned against the cruiser, scrolling through his phone and occasionally glancing at the growing crowd of neighbors. Some had moved closer, their faces showing a mix of curiosity and concern. One middle-aged man in a bathrobe approached Briggs. "What's going on?" "That guy doesn't look like a criminal." "Just routine procedures," Briggs answered without looking up from his phone. "Nothing to worry about." Anthony closed his eyes, trying to manage his rising frustration. 20 years of building spacecraft, a doctorate from MIT at age 24, leading the team that designed the propulsion system for the latest Mars rover. Yet here he sat, handcuffed in the back of a police car because his skin color made him suspicious. The radio in the cruiser crackled. Anthony couldn't make out the words, but Officer Wilson's expression changed as he listened. He walked back to the cruiser and opened the driver's door, sliding into the seat. "So, Dr. Jackson," he said, emphasizing the title with obvious skepticism, "your license checks out. But something isn't adding up about your NASA story." "Everything I told you is true," Anthony replied evenly. "Call NASA headquarters. Or better yet, call General Thompson at Space Force Command." My team works directly with his department on national security satellites. Wilson turned around, his face hard. Listen, I don't know what game you're playing. Normal people don't carry around classified documents, and they certainly don't name-drop generals. I'm not playing games. I'm trying to attend an important meeting about technology that protects this country. The longer you keep me here, the more damage you're doing. The officer's radio buzzed again. This time, the dispatch voice came through clearer. Confirmation from NASA Security. Subject's identity verified as Director of Advanced Propulsion. Advise immediate release. Wilson's face froze. He exchanged a glance with Briggs, who had stepped closer to hear the transmission. Could be a mistake, Briggs muttered. Run it again, Wilson ordered into the radio. And check if there are any warrants under this name from other states. Anthony shook his head in disbelief. You've confirmed who I am. You know I'm telling the truth. Why are you still detaining me? Because people like you don't. Wilson caught himself, but not before Anthony heard the half-finished thought. People like me? Anthony repeated. You mean black people? Or scientists? Or maybe black scientists specifically? Wilson ignored the question. Stay put, as if Anthony had a choice, handcuffed in the back seat of a police car. Another 15 minutes crawled by. From his uncomfortable position, Anthony could see a woman recording the scene with her phone. Good. Documentation might be useful later. His phone rang from inside his jacket pocket. The special ringtone assigned to direct. Calls from Space Force Command. Probably General Thompson wondering why he hadn't joined the video conference. My phone is ringing, Anthony said. It's probably Space Force trying to reach me about the meeting I'm missing. Space Force again, huh? Briggs laughed. What, are they calling to beam you up to your spaceship? No, Anthony replied coldly. They're calling because a $3 billion satellite project is waiting on me, and I'm handcuffed in a police car for driving while black in the wrong neighborhood. The radio crackled again. This time, a different voice came through, deeper, more authoritative. This is Captain Rivera. Officers Wilson and Briggs. What's your status with the NASA director? Wilson grabbed the radio quickly. Sir, we're just conducting a routine verification of... I just got a call from the Pentagon. The captain cut him off. Release Dr. Jackson immediately, return all his belongings, and report to my office first thing tomorrow morning. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft murmur of the neighbors watching the scene unfold. Wilson turned to look at Anthony, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. He'd made a serious mistake. The Pentagon called your captain? Anthony asked, his voice quiet but carrying enough for Briggs to hear. Interesting. I wonder who at the Pentagon would care about a routine traffic stop. Briggs quickly moved to open the back door. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, sir. We're going to remove these cuffs now. As Briggs unlocked the handcuffs, Anthony could feel the stares of the gathered neighbors. His humiliation played out as public theater. How many videos of this incident were already being shared online? How many people had watched a NASA director treated like a criminal? Anthony rubbed his wrists, the skin raw from the tight metal. He straightened his suit jacket and reached for his phone, which Briggs held out to him like a peace offering. 3 missed calls from General Thompson, 5 text messages from Dr. Chen asking where he was, and an email notification from NASA Security. Identity verification requested by local police. My briefcase, Anthony said firmly, with all documents intact. Wilson retrieved the briefcase, closing it without looking Anthony in the eye. Sir, we were just doing our job. This is a high-end neighborhood with recent break-ins and... Stop talking, Anthony said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut the officer's excuse short. You weren't just doing your job. We both know exactly what happened here. He took the briefcase, checked that all documents were inside, and locked it. Your badge numbers are 8473 and 6291, Anthony noted, having memorized them earlier. Your captain is Rivera, and you've just compromised classified materials by handling them without clearance. Anthony straightened his tie and looked at the officers directly. I'll be late for my meeting now, but tomorrow I'll have plenty of time to file reports about this incident with your department, with NASA Security, and with the Department of Defense. As Anthony walked back to his car, the neighbors parted to let him through. A few nodded in silent support. The woman with the phone was still recording. He started his car and drove the remaining blocks to Dr. Chen's house, pulling into the driveway at 8:17 p.m., more than an hour late for the conference. But as he sat in the car gathering himself, Anthony wasn't thinking about satellites or propulsion systems. He was thinking about the phone call he would make after the conference. Not to his lawyer, not to the police department, but to someone whose authority extended far beyond local law enforcement. Someone who understood exactly what it meant when national security assets, human or technological, were compromised by prejudice and ignorance. Tonight, officers Wilson and Briggs had made the biggest mistake of their careers. They just didn't know it yet. Dr. Chen's front door opened before Anthony even rang the bell. His colleague stood there, concern etched across his face. "Anthony, what happened? The team's been waiting for almost an hour." Anthony took a deep breath. "I got pulled over a few blocks from here. The officers..." He paused, the words sticking in his throat. "They didn't believe I worked for NASA." Dr. Chen's eyes widened as he noticed the red marks on Anthony's wrists. "They handcuffed you? That's outrageous." Anthony nodded, following Dr. Chen into his home office where a large screen displayed 4 concerned faces, the international team waiting for their director to join the conference. "Everyone, I apologize for the delay," Anthony said, setting his briefcase down carefully. "I encountered an unexpected situation. Let's continue with the agenda." For the next 40 minutes, Anthony focused entirely on the satellite project, discussing thrust calculations and orbit adjustments with scientists from around the world. Not once did he mention what had just happened to him. That was a different problem, one he would handle separately. When the conference ended, Dr. Chen handed Anthony a glass of water. "You should report those officers," he said. What they did was wrong. Anthony set the glass down without drinking. "I need to make a call first." He stepped onto Dr. Chen's back porch, the night air cool against his face. The stars above reminded him of why he'd become an aerospace engineer in the first place. The vastness of space had always made human problems seem small by comparison. But tonight, those human problems felt enormous. Anthony scrolled through his contacts and found the number he needed. General Richard Thompson, head of Space Technology Integration at Space Force Command. They'd worked together for 3 years on projects too classified to discuss outside secure facilities. The general answered on the second ring. "Thompson. Richard, it's Anthony Jackson." "Anthony, where were you?" The team from Tokyo was asking. "I was detained by police officers a few blocks from Dr. Chen's house," Anthony said, cutting straight to the point. A beat of silence. "Detained for what reason?" "For being black in an expensive car in the wrong neighborhood." Anthony's voice remained steady, factual. "They handcuffed me for 45 minutes. They opened my briefcase and handled the Henderson files. They..." "What?" The general's voice turned sharp. "Those are level 4 classified documents. Who authorized them to..." "No one did. They didn't believe I was a NASA director. They thought I was lying about everything. My job, my purpose for being in the neighborhood, the classified nature of the documents. They made comments about me phoning home to my alien friends." Anthony could almost hear the general processing this information, calculating implications and responses the way military leaders were trained to do. "This isn't just about me, Richard," Anthony continued. "Those officers compromised national security because they couldn't see past their own prejudice. They handled classified materials without clearance. They delayed critical communications about the satellite project. And most importantly, they revealed a fundamental flaw in our security protocols." "What's the flaw?" Thompson asked, his tone now completely professional. "If I can be detained based on appearance alone, despite proper identification, then any of our team members can... But if classified materials can be casually searched by unauthorized personnel, then our entire information security framework is compromised." Another moment of silence. "You have the officers' badge numbers?" Thompson asked. "Yes. Wilson, badge number 473, and Briggs, badge number 6291. Precinct captain named Rivera, He received a call from someone at the Pentagon before ordering my release. That wasn't from me, Thompson noted. Must have been NASA security following protocol, but this requires a more comprehensive response. Anthony gazed up at the stars again. I don't want special treatment, Richard. I don't want to be the black scientist who called in favors. I want the system to work the way it should. This isn't about favors, Anthony, the general replied firmly. It's about national security and accountability. Those officers didn't just disrespect you. They violated protocols protecting technologies that safeguard this country. Anthony could hear the general typing something. With your permission, I'm initiating Security Protocol 87C. It triggers an automatic investigation when classified assets or personnel are compromised. That seems appropriate, Anthony agreed. I'll need your formal statement tomorrow. But for now, I'm activating the preliminary response team. They'll secure all evidence, body cameras, dash cams, dispatcher records, witness statements, before anything can disappear. Anthony leaned against the porch railing. Thank you, Richard. Don't thank me. This is procedure. The general paused. Though I admit I'm personally angry about how you were treated. 20 years of service to this country and they treated you like a criminal. After ending the call, Anthony remained on the porch for several minutes, watching the stars. He thought about the officers who had handcuffed him, wondering if they understood what they had set in motion. When he returned inside, Dr. Chen was waiting with a concerned expression. Everything okay? It will be, Anthony replied. I just initiated Security Protocol 87C. Dr. Chen's eyebrows shot up. The National Security Compromise Protocol? That's going to bring a lot of heat down on those officers. It's not about punishing them, Anthony said, though part of him, the part still feeling the sting of handcuffs on his wrists, wasn't entirely convinced. It's about fixing a broken system. If I don't report this properly, it could happen to someone else on our team. His phone buzzed with a message from General Thompson. Response team activated, DOJ Civil Rights Division notified. Intelligence Oversight Committee briefed. Protocol 87C in effect. Anthony showed the message to Dr. Chen, whose eyes widened. That was fast. Richard doesn't waste time, Anthony replied, especially not when national security is involved. What Anthony didn't say was that Protocol 87C wasn't just an investigation. It was one of the most thorough security reviews possible, involving multiple federal agencies with powers far beyond local police jurisdiction. It was designed for situations involving espionage or major security breaches. Had officers Wilson and Briggs merely pulled him over and checked his ID properly, none of this would be happening. But they had crossed a line, one that connected their routine racial profiling to matters of national importance. That night, as Anthony drove home carefully, hyper-aware of every police car he passed, he wondered what officers Wilson and Briggs were doing. Were they writing up their report of the incident, twisting the narrative to justify their actions? Were they joking about it over drinks? Or had they received some indication that their simple act of prejudice had escalated to levels they never imagined possible? Later, looking at news on his phone, Anthony saw a social media post starting to gain attention. Black NASA director handcuffed while carrying classified documents. Officers didn't believe he works in space program. There was video attached. The Andia woman who had been recording from across the street had posted it online. Comments were flooding in, many expressing outrage, others sharing similar experiences. Anthony set his phone down and closed his eyes. He hadn't wanted this story to go viral. He hadn't wanted to become a hashtag or a talking point on morning news shows. He had simply wanted to drive to his colleague's house for a meeting without being judged by the color of his skin. But maybe this was necessary too. Because while Protocol 87C would address the security breach, it was the public's response that might finally address the deeper problem. The assumption that a black man in an expensive car must be somewhere he doesn't belong. Anthony's phone rang again. This time it was NASA's public affairs director. Tomorrow was going to be complicated. Very complicated indeed. 3 weeks passed. The satellite launch that had been the focus of Anthony's life for months went ahead successfully, its revolutionary propulsion system performing even better than expected. For a few days, news about the NASA achievement replaced Stories about his detainment. Anthony was grateful for the shift in focus, back to his work rather than what had happened to him. But the investigations continued quietly in the background. On a Tuesday morning, Anthony received an email from Agent Lee. Final determination meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your presence is requested. Anthony stared at those simple words, understanding their significance. After 3 weeks of investigations, interviews, and evidence gathering, decisions had been made. Tomorrow would bring closure, or at least consequences. That evening, his doorbell rang. Anthony opened his front door to find a delivery person holding a thick envelope. Special delivery for Dr. Jackson, signature required. Inside the envelope was a formal letter from the police department, requesting his attendance at a disciplinary hearing for Officers Wilson and Briggs the following morning. The same meeting. Agent Lee had mentioned, Anthony slept poorly that night, his mind replaying the incident over and over. The handcuffs digging into his wrists, the officer's casual dismissal of his identity, the briefcase containing national secrets being carelessly handled, the neighbors watching his humiliation, the body camera footage revealing what the officers really thought about a black man in his position. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes, but he dressed impeccably in his best suit. Today wasn't about comfort, it was about dignity. The police department headquarters looked imposing as Anthony parked his car. Reporters had gathered outside, but security personnel guided him through a side entrance, away from the cameras. The nation's interest in the story hadn't faded. In a large conference room, Anthony found Agent Lee waiting alongside General Hayes and 2 other military officers. Representatives from NASA security sat at one end of the table. Local officials, including the mayor and police chief, occupied the other end, looking uncomfortable. Officers Wilson and Briggs sat alone on one side, dressed in civilian clothes. Rather than uniforms, their expressions a mixture of defiance and anxiety. They avoided making eye contact with Anthony as he entered. "Dr. Jackson," the police chief said, standing to greet him. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Anthony nodded and took a chair, noticing the thick folders in front of each person. 3 weeks of investigation had generated substantial evidence. This hearing will address the actions of Officers Daniel Wilson and Thomas Briggs on April 12th, the chief began formally. Multiple investigations have been conducted by separate agencies and their findings will be presented today. Agent Lee spoke first, his voice measured and professional. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has completed its investigation into potential civil rights violations. Based on body camera footage, dispatch recordings, witness statements, and electronic communications between the officers, we have determined that this was indeed a case of racial profiling. He opened his folder and read directly from a report. Officers Wilson and Briggs initiated and prolonged the detention of Dr. Jackson without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Their own recorded statements before, during, and after the incident demonstrate clear racial bias was a motivating factor in their actions. Anthony watched the officers shift uncomfortably in their seats as Lee continued. Furthermore, our investigation uncovered a pattern of similar incidents involving these officers. In the past 18 months, they stopped black drivers at a rate more than 4 times higher than white drivers in the same neighborhoods. In 83% of those stops involving black drivers, searches were conducted, compared to only 12% for white drivers. The police chief looked stunned. This was clearly information his department had either missed or ignored. The mayor jotted notes rapidly, his expression growing more concerned with each statistic. General Hayes spoke next. Space Force's investigation focused specifically on the compromise of classified materials. When Dr. Jackson informed the officers that his briefcase contained classified documents requiring special handling, they not only dismissed his statements, but proceeded to search those materials without authorization. She turned to the officers directly. "You handled documents related to satellite technology vital to national defense. You photographed pages with your department-issued phones, which transmitted images to unsecured police servers. This constitutes a severe breach of national security protocols." Officer Wilson finally spoke up. "We had no way of knowing he was actually a NASA director. People claim all sorts of things during traffic stops. The police chief silenced him with a gesture. You had multiple opportunities to verify his identity through proper channels before escalating the situation. Instead, you chose to handcuff him and handle sensitive materials. Continue, General. General Hayes nodded. Military intelligence considers this incident a security breach requiring significant corrective action. Their separate report recommends immediate revocation of these officers' security clearances and prohibition from any future roles involving national security. The room fell silent as the weight of these pronouncements settled. Anthony sat quietly, face composed despite the emotions churning inside him. The police chief cleared his throat. Based on these findings and our own internal investigation, I have made my determination. He turned to face the officers directly. Officers Wilson and Briggs, effective immediately. Your employment with this department is terminated. Officer, Briggs made a choked sound of protest, but the chief continued. Your conduct violated department policies on multiple levels. Beyond the racial profiling, which alone warrants termination, you compromised national security and brought significant negative attention to this department through your actions. Furthermore, the chief added, his voice hardening, your pensions are forfeited under Section 18C of the department's Code of Conduct regarding termination for serious misconduct. Wilson stood up abruptly. You can't do that. We've put in years. You should be more concerned about the criminal charges, Agent Lee interjected calmly. The Justice Department is filing federal charges against both of you for civil rights violations and mishandling of classified information. Those carry potential prison sentences. Wilson sank back into his chair, the color draining from his face. The mayor spoke for the first time. Dr. Jackson, on behalf of this city, I want to formally apologize for what you experienced. These actions by these former officers do not represent our values or expectations for our police force. Anthony nodded in acknowledgement but remained silent. Apologies meant little without action. As if reading his thoughts, the mayor continued. In response to this incident, we're implementing a mandatory retraining program for all officers regarding racial bias. We're also establishing an independent community oversight board with real authority to review complaints against officers. And, what about others who don't have my connections? Anthony finally asked, his voice quiet but carrying throughout the room. What about the everyday black citizens who get profiled but can't call Space Force or the Department of Justice? The mayor looked uncomfortable. That's exactly why we're creating the oversight board, to give everyone a voice. Anthony nodded, though not entirely convinced. I hope it makes a difference. The meeting concluded with paperwork, statements to sign, forms to complete, legal documents acknowledging the findings. As Anthony prepared to leave, Wilson and Briggs were led away by federal agents to be processed for their criminal charges. Outside, away from the cameras and reporters, General Hayes approached Anthony. Dr. Jackson, Space Force would like to offer you a consulting position with our security protocols team. What happened to you revealed serious vulnerabilities in how we protect our human assets. We need someone with your perspective to help fix those issues. Anthony considered the offer. I'll think about it. Right now, I have another project in mind. 2 months later, Anthony stood before a different audience, a group of high school students from predominantly black neighborhoods. Behind him was the new sign for the Jackson Foundation for Equal Justice and STEM Education. What happened? To me made the news because I designed spacecraft, he told the students. But racial profiling happens every day to people who don't have generals on speed dial. That's why this foundation exists, to provide legal support for those cases and to make sure young people like you have paths into science and technology fields. A student raised his hand. But those officers got fired because you're famous. What about when it happens to regular people? You're right, Anthony acknowledged. The system worked for me because of my position. That's exactly why we need to change the system itself. Part of our foundation's work is establishing legal precedents through strategic cases, making it harder for police departments to ignore these incidents. He gestured to the scientist and engineer mentors standing along the wall. But the other part is making sure more people from our communities enter fields like aerospace engineering, physics, computer science, areas where we're still underrepresented. Because change happens not just through protest, but through presence. After the presentation, Anthony watched the students talking excitedly with the mentors. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Former officers who detained NASA director plead guilty to federal charges, face 2 years in prison. He put the phone away. Justice for those 2 officers wouldn't fix the larger problem, but it was a start, and the foundation would help build something more lasting, both support for victims of discrimination and pathways for bright young minds into scientific fields. Anthony looked up at the foundation's logo, a spacecraft rising above the curve of the Earth. The same view that had inspired him as a child now symbolized his newer mission, lifting others above the barriers that still existed on the ground. The satellite he designed was now orbiting high above, beyond the reach of prejudice or politics. And here below, he was working to build a world where racial profiling would be as unthinkable as it was in the vastness of space, where the only thing that mattered was what you could contribute, not what you looked like. One more student approached him after the others had dispersed. "Dr. Jackson, do you think things will really change in our lifetime?" Anthony considered the question carefully. Change isn't a destination, it's a trajectory. Like launching a spacecraft, you have to calculate not just where things are, but where they're going. We're adjusting the trajectory now, degree by degree. And yes, I believe you'll fly higher than I did with fewer people trying to clip your wings. As the student nodded and walked away, Anthony gazed out the window at the clear blue sky. Somewhere, up there, his satellite tracked silently through orbit, its revolutionary propulsion system working perfectly. Down here, a different kind of revolution continued, slower, harder, but just as necessary, and he would keep pushing it forward, 1 degree at a time.